What's up, everybody? Well, with the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League, it is no time better than now than to talk about Zack Snyder's entire filmography. So we're going to rank all of his movies from worst to best. Now, 2 of these films are actually first-time watches for me, which was kind of interesting, but he's got a pretty varied filmography here. We got an animated film, we got comic book films, we got a sword and sandals epic. It's gonna be wild. Now, if you caught my DC ranking yesterday, I added in the theatrical cut of both Batman v Superman and Justice League just to kind of show the difference in quality between those different cuts. When I'm talking specifically about Zack Snyder, I'm just going to include the Ultimate Edition of BVS and Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, because I honestly don't consider the theatrical cut of BVS or the theatrical cut of Justice League to even be Zack Snyder films. To me, those are just WB films used with shit that Zack Snyder shot. So in this list, we got 8 films. Coming in at number 8, shouldn't surprise anybody, is Sucker Punch. Now, this was actually a first-time watch for me. This is a movie that I never had an interest in watching, never really got intrigued by the trailers before it came out in theaters, have never heard anything more than like a mediocre review for it, so just, it was nothing I ever had a motivation to watch until now for this list. I watched it yesterday, and I understand why a lot of people don't like this film. It's a very visually driven film, and like most, if not all of Zack Snyder's film, that's something that you can say good about all of them, is he's a very visual storyteller. He's a very visually strong director, and that's the biggest thing about this movie that stood out, is that there's some pretty extremely cool visuals here. The problem with the film is that it's very bleak and depressing with the overall story that's going on from start to finish. And it also has this problem where you run into this cliche problem in movies where if something cool is revealed to be a dream sequence, that kind of takes all of the cool out of it, because now that thing we just saw doesn't even exist. Well, this entire movie is a dream sequence, and all of the coolest sequences are dream sequences within the dream sequence. So you double don't give a shit about what you just saw. It basically tells the story of a girl who is locked into an asylum, and to deal with that, she kind of envisions everything that's happening as her being this girl in a brothel, and she has to team up with all of the other girls trapped in this brothel to have this little escape plan to get away. And all of that kind of translates to her trying to get out of this asylum. But the overall story here, starting off with this character seeing her stepfather, who's evil as fuck, murder her little sister, then beat the shit out of her and send her to this asylum and frame her for her sister's murder. And the writing is on the wall the whole movie about where things are going to end up. By the time you get to the end of it, you're like, that was just fucking depressing. I don't feel victorious at all. I don't want to watch this ever again. Cool action sequences, cool concept, interesting delivery of it, but no thanks. Coming in just above that is my other first-time watch, and that is Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of the Ga'Hoole? Legend of the Guardians, that's what everybody ever calls it. It is an animated film about owls, where there is this fable out there that there was these epic owls that were the guardians, and they were the saviors of Ga'Hoole, and there's these evil owls that are a bunch of dicks. And you find out within the first 15 minutes that the evil owls are actually in existence. These 2 characters get kidnapped from their parents. They get pushed into slavitude with these evil owls. One brother turns into a complete asshole. One brother turns into your hero. And now he escapes and has to go and find out if the Guardians are real, and if they are, bring them back to save everybody. The problem with this is that, for one, I like a really good animated film, but as an adult, for me, the best animated film never really hits me the way that live action does. I don't know. Maybe that's just one of those things like Peter Pan. I've lost a bit of my childhood that I'll never get back. But this movie is just a decent, at best, animated film. So it's already way below the curve for that. But as an animated film, for kids, this movie's extremely fucked up. You got owls that are stripped away from their family, frightened the entire path by these evil-ass owls, thrown into slavitude where people are beaten or murdered if they don't toe the line, and then they're just, whenever the fight scenes come, it's like the most vicious animated animal fight scenes you're ever gonna see, and it's rated PG, and I'm like, what kids are gonna like this? This is gonna give people fucking nightmares. This is the type of movie that I can understand some of the overused criticisms of Zack Snyder about everything has to be dark and everything has to be epic and grueling and real. Like, you can apply all of those things that don't make any sense for me for Man of Steel to this movie, and I'm like, yep, you're right. You're absolutely right. Now, from here on up are all movies that I really like. Gigantic gap between number 7 and number 6. And number 6 is going to be Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now, I gave this little PSA on my DC ranking, but I'll give it here because I know some of you fuckers are not going to listen the first time. I like this movie. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I see the writing on the wall with all the fan excitement that me not putting it at number 1 is going to give me some shit just because it's not number 1, even though I'm going to give you a lot of positives. To me, I love the fact that this movie exists. Even if it was a 3 out of 5, I would be like, fuck yeah, I love the fact that this movie exists, and I champion its existence 100%. The fact that Zack Snyder got to redeem this movie, got to take it back and take it back to where he wanted it to be, what the original vision was, and show everybody, and damn near unanimously, everybody's like, fuck yeah, that's what I'm talking about. What the hell were you smoking, WB? I love that. I love that narrative. I love the fact that we get that justice here, no pun intended. With the movie itself, separated from all the fan excitement, separated from the narrative and the precedent that it sets. With the movie itself, I think it's a very cool, epic, grand scale superhero team-up movie that it's intended to be. I think that the villain is significantly better, not only looking, but also better utilized than he was in the theatrical. I think that all of the characters get quite a bit of focus, and they have 4 hours to do it, so I'm damn sure you better have a lot of focus on them. They feel like they are brought together in a much more natural way, and they feel like they're fleshed out a lot better, especially the characters that we have only seen in Justice League, like Flash and Cyborg. I do feel like overall the movie does have this nice little epic scale to it that wraps up nicely for this individual story, but leaves a lot of tail ends for what presumably could be a very awesome follow-up, or what should have been an awesome follow-up before WB took it away. But there's still some inherent problems with this movie, and I don't think that it's perfect. I don't think that it's a masterpiece. I don't think that it's one of my favorites of all time. It's just a significant improvement over the piece of shit that we got 4 years ago. Main problems for me: I don't think that all of the characters in here, meaning the Justice League, have any standout moments that to me are better than the standout moments in their individual films. Like the Batman warehouse fight, better than any action sequence that we get in this. Some of the stuff in Man of Steel, better Superman action than anything that we get in this, for me personally. Wonder Woman, the whole No Man's Land sequence, better than any action sequence or big moment that she gets in here. Aquaman, same thing with his movie. I just don't feel like when you have a movie like Justice League, I feel like there should be like these huge standout sequences where you're like, oh, that could never be as epic if they were not all together. I just don't feel like it ever quite gets there. Action sequences are good, but they're not mind-blowing. I'm also not completely on board yet with Ezra Miller's Flash. I think he's a bit too quirky and nerdy for me. Now, maybe people who are really into Flash are gonna be screaming at me saying that's who the character is. Well, fine. When I see his individual movie, maybe I'll be okay with it. Here, he was a little too quirky for me. Ray Fisher's Cyborg. Much better utilization in this movie by a landslide. I still think, no pun intended again, his character is robotic. I still think he's very one note, and I really genuinely don't have any interest in seeing him again. If he comes back and he's better, cool, I'll welcome it. But if every single one of these characters tomorrow got a follow-up movie, if we got an Aquaman 2, a Wonder Woman 3, a Man of Steel 2, all of them, the Cyborg movie is the one that I would watch last. And the elephant in the room is that we don't know if this is going to be continued and properly finished. That's not this movie's fault. It's not Zack Snyder's fault, certainly, but it is a reality. If this is all we get, then all of the build-up here with Darkseid, all the questions that it raises, all of the continuation of this Injustice dream stuff that's going on, I don't think is going to bode well for me over time, because I'm going to watch it and I'm going to be like, it's cool, but that's all we get, and now I'm fucking left with half a story. But if we get a continuation, this movie could easily go up in my ranking over time. Number 5, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Now, this is the Ultimate Edition. Again, this is the only cut of the movie that I even acknowledge, and I especially only acknowledge it as a Zack Snyder film. This film has some of the best sequences for Superman and Batman as individual sequences. Like, I love the Batman warehouse fight. That's my favorite comic book fight scene, maybe of all time. It's certainly in the top 3. I love it. Part of the reason why everything in Justice League was like, oh, you didn't quite get to that awesomeness. But there's some awesome stuff in here, visually as well as character-wise, with both Batman and Superman. I think that the epic scale of what he was setting up with this movie to tail into a whole universe is very ambitious, and I really do enjoy this overall. I like much more than I dislike. but there are things that I strongly dislike. I think that the movie does feel rushed. I think that the whole confrontation of Batman and Superman feels like it should not have happened in the second film, and anytime I watch it, I feel that. I feel like the death of Superman to Doomsday should not have been in the second film, and it feels like we're rushing to get there just so we can revive him in Justice League. Every time I watch it, I have the same problem. You get to Lex Luthor. I hate this version of Lex Luthor. There's nothing about Jesse Eisenberg's take on this character that I enjoy. No cut of this movie will ever fix that. I understand going for something new, something different. Does not work for me. Sorry, every time I watch it, he annoys the fuck out of me. He's a gigantic, like almost a whole full star taken away from this movie. I dislike it so much. There's even some things in here that feel like the inherent story of Batman fighting Superman gets a little bit too convoluted, and that's part of the reason why even taking 30 minutes out of the film destroys the theatrical cut, because all these tiny little setup scenes can just crumble your story if they're not there. Feels a little bit too convoluted, but overall, I really enjoyed this film. No cut of it's gonna be perfect for me. No cut of it's gonna be like one of the greatest films of all time, but it is a very fun, exciting, epic scale movie that I like more things about it than I dislike. Number 4 is 300. Now, I really enjoy this film. I've never loved it on the scale of everybody else. It seems like pretty much everybody on Earth but me either thinks this is one of the most awesome things in existence or is a gigantic visual noise piece of shit. And I'm closer to this end, obviously. It's number 4, but I've always been somebody that I'm like, yeah, I like that movie. That's about as far as it goes. Zack Snyder really excels as a visual director whenever he takes on graphic novel storylines like this and movies that I've yet to talk about, where he literally translates the page to the screen in a very visual way that matches the feel and the vibe of the page, which you don't see very many directors do that successfully without making it look cartoonish. And Zack Snyder never looks cartoonish, he just makes it look epic. And 300 to me is a very cool, simple storyline about these warriors that have to go and stop this dictator, stop this ruler, and show that he is not a god. And that's as simple as the story is. We're just on this journey to lay down our life to show that that fucker can bleed. And it's a very manly, epic thing to watch. And it's a very cool, exciting, tension-filled, edge-of-your-seat thrill ride every single time that I watch it. The battle scenes and the scale of that are always great to watch. I love all of the individual characters that gets in focus here. I think Gerard Butler is awesome as Leonidas. There's some really quotable lines here that this came out when I was a senior in high school, and people were quoting this shit all the way through my first year at college. Spartans! What is your profession? Admittedly, when I'm in the mood for a sword and sandals movie, which I'm not in the mood for very often, I tend to gravitate towards something like Gladiator much more than I will this, but I still enjoy this for what it is. And once every couple of years, I'll throw it on and enjoy it all the way through. Never been one of my favorites, but always been a movie that I've enjoyed. Now, these top 3 are all movies that I think are fucking incredible. Number 3 for me is gonna be Watchmen. Watchmen was one of the most grand scale, gigantic breath of fresh air comic book style films that I had seen up to that point. I watched Watchmen and I went, wow, I want more movies like this. Again, like 300, taking a graphic novel that seemed like it was impossible to translate to screen, and Zack Snyder does the impossible and does it masterfully, taking the page, directly putting it on screen and making it look fucking great. The whole storyline of this, spanning from the 50s to the 80s, like this grounded alternate reality, alternate history take on what superheroes in that time period actually would do, how they would impact American history with like the Vietnam War and the Cold War. All of the individual characters, from the comedian to Dr. Manhattan to Night Owl to Rorschach especially, was always the standout to me, are just very unique, awesome, badass characters. And this is a movie that it's unlike anything else. There's nothing that's like Watchmen, and Watchmen is like nothing else. This is a graphic novel that has been celebrated as possibly the greatest graphic novel of all time for a reason, and the movie to me is one of the greatest comic book films of all time for a reason. I think the story is just incredible, and I think that the way that Zack Snyder as a visual director translates it is something that should be, no pun intended, marveled at. Now, these top 2 were very hard for me to decide between because I love them both almost on equal level for very different reasons. But where I landed is number 2 is going to be Dawn of the Dead, which is possibly my favorite zombie movie of all time. I did not grow up with the Romero films, and even to this day, having seen pretty much all the Romero films and have seen the 28 Days, 28 Weeks Later, Dawn of the Dead, The Walking Dead, I'm not really a big zombie fan. That's never really been one of my biggest horror subgenres, and I think by this point, especially with The Walking Dead, it's pretty much done to death. But Dawn of the Dead was the first zombie movie that I saw that I genuinely loved. I saw this in theaters. There was this little marketing campaign that came out where you get to see the first 10 minutes uncut in front of something on like USA, and then it cuts off right at the title sequence, and I was like, fuck, we gotta go to the theaters immediately. I have to see how this ends. I have to see the rest of this movie now. When you watch it, and I understand there's detractors out there that say it's nothing compared to the original, I respectfully disagree. Dawn of the Dead, to me, when you have all of these characters, when you have the setting of the mall, when you have some of those commonly criticized Zack Snyder signatures like the slow-mo action and the visual style, to me, it makes one of the best zombie films ever made and one of the best remakes ever made. And for me personally, as somebody that did not grow up with the film, but does really enjoy it, I do prefer this version of Dawn of the Dead over the Romero film. Now, I like all of the characters here. I think they're all interesting and cool and shitty and despicable, all in their own cool little creative ways. I think that the gore and the fast zombies especially, I'm a big believer in fast zombies. That shit doesn't scare me, sorry. I know it's all about numbers and not, extreme physical threat, but this has both, and these zombies would scare the fuck out of me. Just the isolation of this mall with the grand scale, like when they look outside and you see thousands of zombies gathered around, to the character dynamics of these humans and how they're kind of not the best people in certain ways, all the way through to the third act where they make these murder buses and go out and they're chainsawing dudes and they're throwing out propane tanks and blowing things up, and even all the way to the grim ending. I just think that this movie's a badass zombie film, and while I definitely would have to kind of sit down and go through a list to say definitively, I'm pretty sure it's my favorite zombie film of all time, and my second favorite Zack Snyder film. But number one for me is Man of Steel. I said a lot about this in my DC ranking, so you can click that or click any of the other rankings I've done to find out all of my thoughts on this movie. I'm gonna try not to repeat everything here, but I think this is one of the greatest comic book films of all time, and I don't understand any of the criticisms ever held at it. I don't understand a single one of them. To me, this movie made me a Superman fan. And more than anything else in the DC universe, I want a follow-up to this because I love this film so much. This is a movie that every single time that I watch it, I love it more than the last time. There's never been a time where I watch it and something, oh, okay, I kind of see the point there where people don't like that, or, well, I remember that being cooler. No. Every time I watch it, everything that I loved, I love more. I love the humanity that they bring to the character of Clark Kent and Superman and his whole journey throughout this. I think that the action scenes are incredible. I love the whole dichotomy of the two fathers and what each one is trying to teach him that forms him into this kind of perfect mix of both of them. The whole third act, that epic scale battle between him and Zod's lackeys, I think is some of the greatest comic book action of all time, and I don't understand any of the criticisms held at that act either. People died. Yeah, two gods fighting each other, motherfuckers are gonna die. Get over it. There's not really anything else I could say about it. I just absolutely love Man of Steel, and God, I hope we get a follow-up. Whether Zack Snyder does it or not, I just want to follow up with Henry Cavill's Superman in his own movie because I love this. So what do you guys think? What is your ranking of Zack Snyder's films? Let me know down below. If you want to include the alternate cuts, go ahead. I thought that was more relevant to DC than Zack Snyder, but put your ranking down below and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you are not already a subscriber. Thank you guys as always for watching, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.